He fired me in front of half the engineering floor for not volunteering unpaid overtime, then handed me a non-compete like it was a damn participation trophy. Said, and I quote, "That means you don't touch a keyboard for the next 11 months. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just packed my things, slid my inventor certification into my bag, and walked out without so much as a glance back. What he didn't know, that was the last decision he'd ever make without my shadow standing over it. 3 weeks earlier, before the theatrics, before the pink slip power play, before his slick little legal threat, I'd still been the quiet one in the server room. I liked it that way. Dual monitors humming, deployment logs running like gospel down my screens, a pot of black coffee, noise-canceling headphones, and a terminal prompt. That was peace. While the rest of them scrambled for performance reviews and title bumps, I built systems that didn't break. I fixed pipelines Rylan didn't even know existed. Hell, half the code he bragged about in board meetings still had my commit tags buried in the branches, and I left them there, on purpose. Then Vernetrix brought him in. Rylan Fisk, Harvard tie, LinkedIn influencer type, talks in acronyms, strategizes with a whiteboard he never erases. Tech isn't about code, it's about optics, he said on day one, like he was announcing the second coming. I watched from my usual station, far corner near the locked cabinet no one but me could get into, and listened to him tell my team they needed to start thinking like a startup. He paused in front of my desk, looked down at the paper notebooks I kept, full of API sketches and command line notes, and muttered, "Vintage. Are those like for decoration?" I didn't look up, just said, "Only thing more permanent than code is paper. You'll figure that out." His laugh, smug, like he thought I was a museum exhibit. "We'll modernize that out," he said. Then strutted off toward DevOps like he'd discovered electricity. Hey, quick thing, 97% of you listen to these stories without subscribing. If you're still here, if you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really helps the team keep dropping stories like this. Appreciate you. Anyway, first week under Fisk was a circus. He removed 2 senior engineers for bad attitude after they questioned his CI changes. He had us reformat all commit messages to match some vanity standard he picked off a podcast. When I quietly suggested his new deployment flow was going to brick our rollback triggers, he told me to stick to keyboard hygiene. Keyboard hygiene. Like I was some toddler with chocolate fingers on a MacBook. That's when I started logging every comment, every change, every exclusion. Because here's the thing. While he played dress-up CTO, I was already prepared. I'd been prepared for 2 years. See, back in 2021, our founder, Marshall, asked me to spearhead a side project to optimize multi-tenant orchestration for enterprise clients. No deadlines, no oversight, just build it right. I did. Nights, weekends, unpaid stretches with nothing but root access and Red Bull. I didn't ask for extra titles. I didn't care. But I documented every single commit under my name, and when the thing actually worked, when it cut load times by 63% and sliced client costs in half, they wrapped it into our core stack and called it the Fisk engine, named after the new guy, who hadn't even seen the architecture doc. But I had something better than a name. I had author certs. I had integration records. And I had, tucked inside a binder that Rylan once scoffed at during a town hall, the inventor certificate filed under the state's Digital Engineering Act. It sat there, quiet, waiting, just like I did. Rylan thought he was waging a war with PowerPoints and posturing, but I wasn't in a war. I was in a clock tower, watching, taking notes, waiting for the one moment he'd make the wrong move, in public, in writing. And when he did, when he tried to fire me with a fake smile and a rehearsed line about tough decisions, he didn't just make a mistake, he triggered a statute he hadn't even read. But I had, and I'd bookmarked it the moment it passed. First thing Monday morning, Rylan sends out a Slack announcement. Architecture Committee refresh. Invites sent. My name isn't on it. I refreshed twice. Check my calendar, nothing. The committee I helped build from scratch, the one I'd chaired for 3 years during every systems overhaul and emergency rollback, suddenly no longer required my strategic input. No explanation, just silence, and a new invite list full of his coffee buddies and 2 interns he once referred to as codefluencers. I don't react, not outwardly. I simply open my personal documentation file, titled Insurance, and add a new bullet point under Structural Omission Patterns. Date, timestamp, committee exclusion, Source code versions impacted. Then I close it, sip my coffee, and rerun a deployment diff check that proves their refresh already introduced a memory leak. By noon, Ryland's on a walk and talk with a sales lead, waving his arms like he's solving world hunger. I hear him through the glass. She's great at maintenance, but we need innovation at the top. Vision, execution, Maintenance. That's what he calls 3 years of authoring the orchestration core that their entire platform runs on. That's what he calls the automated rollback logic that once saved a Fortune 500 client from losing 1.4M during a malformed integration. Again, I don't argue. I highlight the word maintenance in my log and file it under narrative manipulation. Then I open the statute I bookmarked 3 weeks ago. It's a clean one, passed quietly during Q4 last year, buried in a workforce realignment bill. Section 3AV. Non-compete agreements rendered unenforceable if the terminated party is the documented originator of intellectual property under active licensing. It's short, but surgical. I email myself the full PDF. Twice. Around 2:15 that afternoon, Rylan walks past my desk, holding court with one of the DevRel managers. Spots my binders stacked neatly against the cubicle wall. Black, weathered, each labeled with a quarter and a component set. He taps one. "These antiques yours?" I look up. "Yep," he smirks. "What? Google Docs too modern for you?" "Paper lasts longer than your tenure," I say, without a blink. He chuckles, half to the manager, half to himself. "We'll be digitizing everything soon. Welcome to the cloud." The DevRel guy chuckles nervously. I don't. I just add public derision of documentation practices, 2:17 p.m. to my log. 2 days later, something shifts. Not internally, but externally. An email lands in the shared client liaison inbox. Subject: Varnetrix Q2 orchestration inquiry. The sender? Lead engineer from our biggest renewal client. 220 websites, multi-year deal on the line. They're asking questions about our orchestration schema, specifically about legacy tolerances and override behavior under multi-tenant compression. The kicker? They address it to Rylan and CC me directly with a note that reads, "We'd like confirmation from the original system architect." I wait. Rylan replies with a paragraph of vague fluff about agile structure and forward-leaning compatibility assurance. Zero substance. I don't even have to read it twice to know it's gibberish. The client's reply is dry. "Could Marin please clarify the following?" Now I see it. The first crack. The outside world is noticing what the internal egos have tried to erase. My name, my authorship, my absence from decisions they now realize require my hands, not his voice. Rylan forwards the thread to me with nothing but, "Handle this. Don't overcomplicate." So I do. I respond precisely. 2 paragraphs. Exact subsystem references, commit dates, rationale for each override threshold, and a note reminding them the logic paths are documented under cert auth ME per their SLA. My signature doesn't need to shout. It's there. Me, Marin Ellery, printed, archived, filed. 10 minutes later, their head of compliance replies, "Thank you, Marin. We'll defer to your documentation on all future renewal reviews." I mark that email with a star. Not because I need validation, but because I know exactly how many more of those are coming. I didn't design the engine for applause. I designed it to last. And it remembers who built it. Thursday morning, 10 minutes before the cross-team integration briefing, I found the issue. Not a bug, something worse. A silent flaw. An orchestration edge case buried deep in the modified rollback loop, introduced during Ryland's committee refresh. If triggered, it wouldn't crash the system. It would do something subtler, deprioritize timeout alerts under certain tenant loads, delaying failovers by just enough to cause contractual SLA violations. Maybe 100 clients affected, maybe 1,000. A digital slow bleed. I documented it. 3 pages, printout in my left binder sleeve. Code snippet, condition logic, proof path, and potential risk envelope. I slid it into my meeting folder like a surgeon prepping a scalpel. The conference room's packed. One side filled with internal leads from engineering and sales, the other lined with the renewal client's implementation team. 4 suits, 2 engineers, and 1 liaison who watches everything like a hawk. Rylan breezes in late, sleeves rolled up, phone still in hand. "All right, folks, let's get aligned on the orchestration roadmap before next week's sign-off." We're 30 minutes in when he gestures to me. "Marin, Do a quick overview of the legacy flow for these folks. Keep it high level. I start walking through the schema, top-down triggers, auto fallback behavior, SLA prioritization logic. When I ease into the problem, I don't announce it with fireworks. I never do. I simply point to the sequence and say, there's a recently introduced logic condition here. Line 702 of the orchestration handler. If 3 or more tenants exceed the fallback threshold concurrently, rollback delay tolerances can compound silently. It won't throw an error, but Rylan cuts me off like a car wreck. We don't need junior dev angst in front of paying clients. It's not the words. It's the way he says it, loud enough that the room stills. The sales manager coughs into his sleeve. One of the client engineers freezes with his pen midair. The technical liaison, a quiet woman named Jada with a sharp eye and sharper memory, leans forward slightly. Watching, I don't flinch. I don't argue. I simply close my mouth and reach slowly into my binder. Flip to the page I'd marked earlier with a red tab. Section 3AV of the State Employment Code. The clause about intellectual property originators and termination triggered exemption from restrictive covenants. My thumb rests against the paragraph as Rylan prattles on about modern agility and cloud-native resilience. Words he read in a trade blog and now flings like confetti. Across the table, Jada is still watching. Not him. Me. I tilt the binder just slightly, just enough for her to see the statute header. No words, no theatrics, just ink and silence. The meeting continues without me. Rylan waves his arms and praises the efficiency of the new stack. Someone makes a joke about retiring the old scripts. Laughter follows, but not from the clients. After the room starts to empty, I collect my things slowly. Jada lingers near the door. Then one of the client's engineers, young guy, glasses, sharp posture, leans over and whispers, "You wrote this engine, didn't you?" I don't answer. I don't need to. He nods like that was enough. Because it is. The code knows, the paper trail knows, and now, so do they. It started with a neutral email, too polite to raise eyebrows, too precise to be casual. Per our ongoing renewal review, we'd appreciate the opportunity to clarify certain historical architecture assumptions. Would you be open to a brief one-on-one? No CCs, no emojis, no scheduling link, just a direct contact from Delane Franklin, one of the senior legal advisors for the renewal client. His name had been buried in contracts I helped negotiate 3 years ago when we were still onboarding their tenant matrix. He hadn't forgotten. I replied with a single line. Available this Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Let me know if you'd prefer Teams or Signal. He chose Signal. The call opened with courtesy, but it didn't stay there long. Delane got straight to it. We've reviewed the orchestration deployment flow and traced several core behaviors back to original architecture files. Your name appears consistently. On commits, design notes, even the failover cert routing. I confirmed. Quietly. Factually. Yes, I authored the core orchestration logic under Marshall's original sandbox authorization. The integration stack was built during unpaid dev cycles on internal equipment. All commit signatures and timestamps are intact. The cert routing was filed under state guidance, Engineering IP Statute 2.3b. He didn't interrupt, just let me talk. I opened the binder, the one Rylan called Antique, and read off the section numbers tied to my original schema. I also shared a PDF folder containing scanned design drafts, a notarized affidavit from our former lead systems architect confirming my authorship, and the original patent filing addendum Marshall insisted I draft just in case leadership ever got creative. It wasn't a defensive gesture, I wasn't protecting myself, I was handing them clarity. By the time we ended the call, Delane's tone had shifted. It wasn't warm, but it was sharp now. Alert. He thanked me not just for the materials, but for the precision and professional restraint. That was the moment I knew the veil had lifted. They saw the truth now, not the title beside my name, but the gravity underneath it. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Rylan strutted through the open workspace like a man who just discovered Kubernetes. "We're finally streamlining the dev pool," he announced during a surprise all-hands. "Too much legacy clutter. We need velocity, not nostalgia." He motioned vaguely toward the rear of the room, toward my empty chair, since I'd stopped attending his meetings in person. If people aren't evolving, they're just roadblocks. Someone clapped. I don't know who. I didn't look up. Because I was in another meeting, this time with the client's technical compliance lead. They'd flagged inconsistencies in the integration cert flow. Specifically, why all license chains routed through a user listed as Mellery AUTF, a profile tied directly to my employee ID. I answered with a single line, "That's the master credential the engine won't run without." It landed. They didn't need me to spell it out. They were already doing the math. Behind Ryland's noise, the legal teams were stitching together a different picture, a timeline of who built what, when, and under which contractual terms. One where my name wasn't a footnote. It was the source, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. The room smelled like too much cologne and burnt coffee. Typical pre-renewal circus. Ryland had booked the top conference suite, complete with catered snacks and a laminated agenda no one asked for. Integration master sync, future-proofing Varnetrix, it said across the top in bold blue font. He stood near the head of the table, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, performative exhaustion on full display like he was carrying the weight of innovation itself. I took a seat near the far end, not in the spotlight, not even close, just within range. I placed a single folder on the table, unlabeled, and pulled my hair back into a loose twist. No laptop, no phone, just a pen and a badge clipped to the folder, the one he never bothered to ask about. The client's delegation entered briskly. Jada, their technical liaison, nodded when she saw me. Not friendly, respectful. Behind her came the firm's lead counsel, Delane, and finally their project investor, a thin man in a slate gray blazer with a watch that probably cost more than my car. Ryland stood like a game show host. "Welcome, welcome. Excited to show you where we've taken your infrastructure this quarter." He opened with buzzwords. Decoupled containers, synergized data fabrics, predictive elasticity, none of which meant a damn thing without the orchestration to hold it together. And that orchestration? Still mine. 15 minutes in, Jada raised her hand. "We want to confirm that the engine changes meet the licensing integrity parameters from the original compliance package." Ryland smiled. "Of course, my team's cleaned up a lot of the legacy logic. We're modernizing the stack while staying within authorship tolerances." I spoke for the first time. "Could you define authorship tolerances?" He turned, surprised I'd spoken aloud. "Here to audit my work again, Marin?" He chuckled, loud and performative. "Do you even know how enterprise integration works?" The room shifted. You could feel it, like someone had shut a window midsummer and sucked the air out. Jada's eyes narrowed. Delane stopped tapping his pen. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Instead, I reached for the folder in front of me, unhooked my badge, and slid it across the table. It wasn't my employee ID. It was the inventor's certification tag. Black laminate, state sealed, embedded QR. At the bottom, beneath the barcode, my full name, Marin Ellery. Inventor of record, Statute 2.3b IP orchestration system, license reference ID 4407NT09. Silence. Jada picked it up first. Read it fully. Her expression didn't change, but her posture did. Spine straighter, attention tighter. She passed it to Delane. He blinked once, then twice, then handed it to the investor. He studied it for a moment, turned slowly toward Ryland and said, "Do you know who she is?" The question wasn't theatrical, it was surgical, like a wire slipping beneath skin, quiet and lethal. Ryland opened his mouth. Nothing came out, not right away. Then, with an awkward laugh, "Of course, she was part of the original, implementation team." "Not implementation," I said, still seated, still calm. "Architect." The investor laid the badge down, face up. "We're going to need to revisit your compliance briefings," he said without looking at Ryland. No one asked me to speak again. No one had to. I'd already said everything worth hearing, years ago, in code, in architecture diagrams, in signatures and time-stamped proofs they all ignored until now. The air was different after that. My presence didn't just shift the room. It rewrote it. Delane didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. That's how you know a lawyer means business. When their volume drops, not rises. "We cannot proceed without the certifying inventor's approval," he said, adjusting his glasses with a deliberate calm that sliced through Ryland's bravado like piano wire through butter. Ryland laughed, this twitchy, high-pitched thing that sounded more like panic trying to wear a smile. "With all due respect," he began, which is executive code for I'm about to insult someone smarter than me. Marin's a great contributor, but she's not the linchpin here. The system runs with or without her. She's replaceable, just a coder. The temperature in the room dropped. Delane didn't flinch. She's not just anything. She holds the active inventor certification under State Employment Law 2.3b. Her signature is embedded in the orchestration licensing chain. You tamper with that, you break the compliance chain, and your entire stack becomes non-compliant under your renewal terms. The investor turned, slowly, like a man who just realized his name was misspelled on a $1 million wire transfer. "Let me get this straight," he said to Rylan, his tone pure ice. "You've been restructuring the architecture, discrediting the certifying author, and cutting her out of the committee while her name holds the legal license to deploy the product we're investing in." Rylan blinked. "That's not... she wasn't... The original code base is legacy." "She holds the license," the investor snapped, standing now. "Remove her and your stack violates compliance. That's not a legacy issue. That's a contract breach." Rylan looked around the room for backup and found none. Not from Jada, who now had her arms crossed and was very clearly done pretending he understood what he was doing. Not from the product manager, who suddenly found great interest in the label on her water bottle. Not even from the junior developer Rylan always dragged into meetings like some kind of living prop. He just stared at his notepad like it might save his career. And me? I said nothing. I didn't lean in, didn't smirk, didn't even blink. I simply adjusted the corner of my badge, the one still resting face up in front of me, and let the silence work harder than I ever had to. Because Ryland's empire, the meetings, the titles, the jargon, was a paper fortress built on an engine I had architected line by line. His authority was performative, mine was structural. And when structure speaks, performance doesn't matter. For the rest of the meeting, they stopped addressing questions to him. They addressed them to me. By 1:47 p.m., Ryland's name vanished from the renewal Slack channel. No announcement, no explanation. Just gone, like a corrupt variable silently purged from memory. The channel topic updated from CTO-led briefings to client alignment coordination, lead M. Ellery. At 2:12 p.m., I got the email from HR. Subject: Performance Alignment Discussion. Message body: Hi Marin, leadership would like to schedule a brief sync regarding your current role and strategic positioning. Please indicate availability. I didn't respond. Not yet. Let them squirm a little in the ambiguity they created. At 3:09 p.m., the founder of Varnetrix, Marshall Gray, returned from his 3-week tech conference blitz in Singapore. I only knew because he walked past the server room I was working in and did a full double take, holding a printout of the integration license index like it had just cursed at him. He stopped, stared, then muttered, more to himself than to me, "How did he not know she built the engine?" I didn't answer. He wasn't really asking me. At 3:46 p.m., the renewal client submitted a formal request through their vendor portal. Final integration walkthrough to be led by certifying inventor Marin Ellery, required before compliance re-sign-off. No negotiation, no alternate names, just mine. So I pulled out the binder, the same one Rylan mocked as antique, same one he tapped with a smirk like it was holding his grandfather's recipes. I set it on the conference room table, opened it to section 4.2, Service Orchestration Variance Handling, and began. No screen share, no presentation deck, just paper, diagrams, and steady voice. The client team followed every word. No interruptions, no smirks. Jada asked 2 questions, both answered by pointing to hand-sketched workflows annotated in pen. When I showed them the exact logic path that preemptively rerouted failovers during simultaneous tenant spikes, something Rylan had once dismissed as over-engineering, Delane leaned back and simply said, "Elegant." The walkthrough took 42 minutes. The approval email came in 37 minutes later. Renewal recommendation approved. All architecture conditions met. Compliance certs confirmed valid. I closed the binder, clipped it shut, and walked out of the room before anyone could clap or speak or spin it into a headline. I didn't need applause. I didn't need Ryland's old title. I didn't even need the seat at the next leadership offsite. What I needed, what I earned, was clarity. Unmistakable, ink on paper, audit trail clarity, that I had built this thing, that they had tried to erase me, and that the system, my system, refused to run without me. No speeches, no revenge monologues, just correction, quiet and final. The deposition was held in a windowless room that smelled like overcooked coffee and stale anxiety. Beige walls, flickering fluorescence, the kind of space where reputations don't die loudly, they just wither into silence. I wore gray. No makeup, no jewelry, just a black leather folder and a pen that had already written 3 resignation letters for former bosses in another life. Across from me sat Rylan, freshly shaved but twitchy, like someone trying to cosplay competence. His lawyer, a corporate partner from a downtown firm with more letters in his title than common sense in his strategy, shuffled papers and tried to project calm. He didn't look at me once. "Let's begin," the company's counsel said, pressing record. The opening 30 minutes were theater, him trying to paint my departure as abrupt, combative, and in violation of the non-compete clause I'd signed years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, a man who publicly erased my authorship, now claiming ownership over where I'm allowed to type code. They presented screenshots of my LinkedIn update, technical systems consultant, contracted role, Rizor Group. Rylan smirked, like that was his gotcha moment, like he'd caught me tagging graffiti on the company's side wall. I waited. Then came the part they weren't ready for. The company's own lawyer, Bryce, I think his name was, flipped to a printed packet I recognized immediately, the employment law update from 3 months ago. The one I'd bookmarked, the one I'd printed, the one that now sat in my leather folder with a red tab labeled Trigger. Bryce began reading, voice monotone. Per Employment Statute 3AV, effective August 1st, any individual who is both 1. The documented originator of active intellectual property under enterprise license, and 2. Involuntarily terminated during a reduction or reclassification period, shall be exempt from previously enforceable non-compete clauses. He stopped, mid-sentence, eyes still on the page, then he looked up, slowly, and turned to Rylan. "On what exact date," he asked, voice thinner now, "did you terminate Ms. Ellery?" Rylan blinked. It was in May, I think, or maybe June." I spoke, calm as the server room at 3 a.m. "June 3rd, 11:12 a.m. Pacific. I have the termination email. Would you like me to forward it?" Bryce didn't respond right away. He just exhaled, quietly, then glanced at the stack of documents in front of him like they'd betrayed him personally. He turned back to the recorder. "For the record, based on the termination date and the updated statute's enactment, the non-compete claim is no longer enforceable. Additionally, the company may be in breach of inventor protection compliance under State IP Provision 2.3b. Silence followed, the kind that hums louder than shouting. Rylan fidgeted in his chair, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping on the dock. The lawyer next to him leaned back like he'd just been handed a live grenade. I didn't gloat. I didn't flinch. I just opened my folder, turned to the next tab, and waited. Because this was never about drama, never about revenge. It was about proof. And the one thing more permanent than titles, than smirks, than polished LinkedIn blurbs, was code. And the law that finally caught up to the truth it told. The lawsuit didn't even last long enough for the coffee to cool. 47 minutes, to be exact. After the statute was read into the record and the timeline confirmed, Rylan's legal team requested a recess. 10 minutes later, they returned with a 2-sentence withdrawal. All claims against Ms. Ellery are hereby dropped with prejudice. No further action will be pursued. The court reporter didn't even look surprised. She just marked the timestamp and turned off the mic. I walked out without a word. No handshake, no eye contact. Rylan didn't follow. I don't think he could stand. By the following week, the renewal client had redrafted their contract, not with Varnetrix, with me. Direct consulting agreement, 18-month retainer, triple my old salary, no non-compete clause, no restrictive language, full autonomy over architecture decisions and licensing continuity. The clause they added in bold made me smile. Technical oversight to remain solely with EMSA Ellery for duration of system lifecycle. Rylan's board called an emergency session 3 days after that. I didn't attend, but word traveled. They used the phrase operational negligence in the dismissal note. Internally, they referred to it as the Ellery incident. His badge was deactivated before his post-layoff farewell email could send. I never replied to the HR follow-up. Let the silence stand. That was the only thing that ever spoke truth at Varnetrix anyway. A week later, at a quiet client appreciation dinner hosted by the renewal firm, I found myself seated next to a junior analyst. Bright kid, new to systems, Too polite to hold back his curiosity, he leaned in halfway through dessert, unsure if he was allowed to ask what everyone else had clearly been wondering. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "How'd you stay so calm through all of it? The exclusion, the lawsuit, the everything?" I sipped my tea. No flourish, no cleverness, just truth. Because the code remembers who wrote it. He blinked, then nodded, like something clicked into place. Afterward, I walked the hall of the firm's main office, heading out toward the elevator. On the way, I passed their tech wing, small, sleek, all glass and polished concrete. Just past the reception desk, on a wall with no signage, no spotlight, hung a single black frame. Inside it, my original state-issued inventor certification. Matte background, white border, no caption. They didn't ask me before they hung it. They didn't need to, because that frame wasn't about fame. It wasn't about revenge. It was recognition. In the only language that matters. Quiet, permanent, real.